Continuing in the second chapter, page 26. Okay, and last time we started with this, which is a number of different applications of our principle. The chapter is called Inspiration and Disappointment, or Why a Good Time Never Lasts. And we spoke about the fact that there are patterns. The pattern in reality, which is that things start off on a massive high. Last time we spoke about how a person who comes to Torah and mitzvot, a Baal Tshuva comes to Torah and mitzvot at a later stage in life, there's that initial high, that initial burst of energy, and then it just becomes sort of normal. And then we wonder, like, where's it gone? You know, where is that initial excitement gone? And really what we do have to do is to continue working it. We could get back to that excitement, but it comes from a different way, a different angle. He's now going to speak about another application of this, which is very, very real life, to do with marriage and relationships. So in the middle of page 26, paragraph begins, perhaps the sharpest application of this idea in modern Western society is in marriage. Marriage today is to a large extent in ruins in the secular world. In many communities, divorce is more usual than survival of marriage. And even in those marriages which do survive, it is common to find much disharmony. I think I would add that nowadays, because I think this was written about 20 years ago, nowadays, I think a lot of people in the world out there just don't get married. It's no longer something which is sort of taken for granted as a, next step in life. As Jewish people, obviously, it's a value for us. But I think for many people now in the world, it's not necessarily a value at all. And therefore, they kind of, if you like, avoid the whole business, right? But really, we have to see, because the Torah encourages us to get married. The very first marriage is actually between Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, and no less than God himself is the Shadchan, if you like. He arranges the marriage. Now, it happens to be there was no one else. They say that's why he was the happiest marriage ever. There was no mother-in-law. But apart from no one else to look at in the world, my mother-in-law's not here. It's okay. No, we get on very, very well. Mum's away as well, by the way, so she's probably going to be listening to this, and she is also a wonderful mother-in-law. And nevertheless, you see right from the beginning of creation that the institution of marriage, if you like, it's part of the creation, really, of the world, right? You've got Adam and Eve created there on the sixth day of creation, Adam and Chava created to be a partnership, to get married to each other. So for us, it's not something which is just kind of like accidental, that, it's convenient, they help each other and man and woman get married and it's very nice and it's traditional or anything else. This is a part of the creation of the world. This is part of the fabric of who we are as human beings, right? So this is important for us. But on the other hand, we see that sometimes there's a lot of disharmony. So he's going to discuss this. One of the prime factors in this disastrous situation is the lack of understanding of our subject. Marriage has two distinct phases: romance and love. Romance is the initial, heady, illogical swirl of emotion which characterizes a new relationship. And it can be extreme. If you've ever tried to speak to someone, after they've gone out with someone for the first time, and you'll often have to just okay, take it with a pinch of salt, come and speak to me after, you've met her a few more times and that sort of thing. And you'll realize, she's also a human being and she's no angel and that sort of thing, right? You have to, but that initial kind of excitement, that initial passion, which is a wonderful, beautiful thing, that's romance. Love, in Torah terms, is the result of much genuine giving. Pay attention to that, because we often think it's the other way around. Love is the result of giving. So it's not that we love someone and then we give to them, but rather we give to someone and that fosters and creates love. He continues, love is generated essentially not by what one receives from a partner, but by the well-utilized opportunity to give and to give of oneself. And that's important, by the way, because obviously it's good to give gifts. That is important, but sometimes a person only gives gifts, and the flowers that are brought to one's wife and thrown onto the countertop, and I've done my obligation as a husband, that's it, yeah? And for the wives on the call, it can happen the other way around as well. It's possible, and then that's it. And then I've done my duty. That's not enough, because we have to give of oneself, which means the care, which means the empathy, which means the time, which means listening, all of those, things that we give of oneself. But when we do that, that giving, that's what generates love. He continues, the phase of romance very soon fades. In fact, just as soon as it is grasped, it begins to die. That's also something which is interesting. And then you're always trying to hold on. The person who's always that is holding something that's slipping through his fingers, really. And he's always trying to hold. It's a very frustrating thing. A spiritually sensitive person, page 27, knows that this must be so. But instead of becoming depressed and concerned that one has married the wrong person, one should realize that the phase of work, which is giving, is just beginning. The phase of building real love can now flourish. In fact, in Hebrew, there is no word for romance. In its depth, it is an illusion. However, in the world of secular values, the first flash, the quick fix, is everything. Meaning, what do we actually value? Do we value that stage of love which comes after we've worked and we've given of ourselves and we've invested in the relationship with another person? Or do we value those scenes of romance that, let's face it, that's what the movies are all about, the first initial burst of passion and energy, and we spend the rest of our lives feeling frustrated because we've lost that initial burst, which we thought, and we had always been told, was the true love. He continues, love is too often translated as romance, and when it dies, what is left? No one's taught young people that love and life are about giving and building, and so the tendency is to give up and search for a quick fix elsewhere. Okay, now remember, by the way, that's the immaturity of youth often, the whole sort of boyfriend and girlfriend culture where it's like every week there's someone else. Again, where does that come from? From this. There's an initial excitement, and then after a week it wears off, maybe 2, maybe 3, however long it is, in more often than not. And then it's moving on to something else because it needs something else which is exciting and which is new and which is different, etc. Right? That's where that's coming from. And unfortunately, sometimes an adult can also not realize this, and they're looking continuously for that quick fix elsewhere. And when you're an adult, that can have much more disastrous consequences. It's not as simple as being a child and teenager and moving on from week to week to, a new best friend. It can have really disastrous consequences. He continues, of course, the search must fail because no new experience will last. Understanding this well can make the difference between marital misery or worse and a lifetime of married happiness. Jewish marriage is carefully crafted to transition from initial inspiration, not to disappointment, but to even deeper inspiration. The menstrual separation laws are just one example. Instead of allowing intensity to dull into tired familiarity, phases of separation generate new inspiration and the magic never fades, which means that the Torah marriage, which, as we said, is built around those laws, the laws of family purity, though that is designed to make sure that a person is constantly giving, that people and the couple and the relationship are constantly refreshing, and they're giving of themselves, they're giving of each other, and not only in a material way, and not only in a physical way, but also in an emotional way. And that's why there are different times of the months and different ways to act at different times, because that's what a relationship needs if we're going to really and truly invest in it for the long term. When we look at marriage like that, when we realize, yes, there was the initial excitement, there was the initial burst of energy, if you like, there was the limitless potential, that was contained at the beginning, which is very exciting. And by the way, that's the excitement of a wedding. That's the simcha, the great joy of the wedding, but that propels them forward for the next step, because the next step is giving and giving and giving. And even as I'm saying it, I know I could do better. I'm going to hold up my hands. I could definitely do more, and I could definitely do better. But at least when we can acknowledge that that is the next stage, and it's never going to feel like the initial, it's not, nor is it supposed to feel like the initial. That's our second step. But that will bring us to a level, which is, again, that third step. And in this case, that's really bringing the two people together. It's bringing those two people together in a much more real and true way than they could ever have experienced at the beginning with that initial romance. So there's romance at the beginning, which is important. And then following that, there is love. And that comes from true giving. Let's continue. The bottom page 27. In all these applications, and in fact, all of life, the challenge of the second phase is to remember the first, to remain inspired by that memory, and to use it as fuel for constant growth. I remember a good piece of advice that I got at my wedding. Still remember doing this. I don't remember who it was. Someone came up to me and said at the wedding, you're sitting there at the top table and the hall is full. There's, people have come from far and wide. He said, just take a moment, look around and take it all in. Just kind of like, look around, breathe in and keep the sight and keep that in your mind. Because throughout the time when you're married, it's a beautiful thing to remember that was the initial kind of burst, that was the initial excitement. As he says, that first stage, that gives the inspiration, it gives the fuel for what comes afterwards. The Rambam describes life as a dark night on a stormy plain. Lashed by the rain, lost in the darkness, one is faced with despair. Suddenly, there's a flash of lightning. In a millisecond, the scenery is as clear as day. One's direction is obvious. But just as soon as it is perceived, it disappears. And one must fight on through the storm with only the memory of that flash for guidance. The lightning lasts very briefly, but the darkness may seem endless. Page 28. That is the pattern of life. Short-lived inspiration and lengthy battles. The tools needed are determination, perseverance, and a stubborn refusal to despair. Personal ordeals which make despair seem imminent are a father's hands withdrawn so that you can learn to walk. And the work of remembering the flash of light when it seems impossible is emunah, it's faith, which is a beautiful way of looking at it, because faith essentially, and this Rabbi Tatz develops elsewhere, I believe later on in the book as well, faith is not just about believing in God. Faith is about being faithful to that belief, being faithful to something. So that means when I have that initial burst of inspiration and I have something which I know is true, and then afterwards, it all seems to get dark and it all seems to be fuzzy and it all seems to be much more challenging to actually believe. I'm faithful to what I know is true. I'm faithful to that knowledge, to that burst of inspiration. And that continues to keep me going because I stay and I don't despair. I continue working, I continue persevering, all of those different things. And that's the pattern of everything throughout life. That's the pattern of how we become great. That's the pattern of consistency that makes us into great people. And really that brings us full circle to the next flash of light, if you like, the next inspiration, which fuels the next period of growth. And he continues the third phase, and happy is the one who attains it whilst yet alive, is transcendence. It is a regaining of the level of the first phase, but now deserved, earned, and therefore far beyond it. So it's the level of excitement and passion and energy that we had at the beginning, but you've now earned it. It's not just something which came all by itself. It's something which actually we've earned, we've worked towards. There's a statement of the sages which describes the final transcendence, the transition from this world to the next, and it describes the angels which come to greet a person at that time. One of these angels comes to search out, where is this person's Torah? And is it complete in his hand? Right? Meaning the angels, when they're greeting a person at the end of one's life, they ask, what is the knowledge that that person has amassed? What are you going to bring? What are you going to bring with you? Because we don't take our material possessions into the world to come, into the next world, but we do take our mitzvahs, the good deeds that we've done. We take our Torah that we've learned. The angel, as it were, comes to greet a person and says, what are you bringing with you? What have you got? The Gaon of Vilna, the great Rabbi Eliyahu Kramer from Vilna, points out chillingly that the higher being which asks this question is not a stranger. Suddenly one recognizes the very same angel with whom he learned Torah in the womb. And the question to be answered is, where is the Torah that inspired you then? Have you brought it into the world and made it real? And can it now be called yours? Which means the very same angel that gave us that initial burst of inspiration, the very same angel that, as we spoke about then, sort of hit us on the mouth and then we, as it were, forgot that information, comes back at the end of our life and says, did you work at it? Did you make it your own? Did you take the opportunities that you had in your lifetime? There's a story about the Vilna Gaon, actually, the same person we just quoted, Rabbi Eliyahu. He was lying down on his deathbed. It was the end of his life. And he was holding his tzitzis up. And his students see him holding his tzitzis with tears in his eyes, tears streaming down his face. And they say, Rebbe, you know, you're in pain. Anything we can do to make you more comfortable? What's the matter? And he says, no. He says, I'm fine. He says, it's not that. He says, no. So they say, so why are you crying? So he says, what I can earn in this world for a kopek, which is a small coin in Vilna, Lithuania, I cannot earn for any money in the world to come. The mitzvah of tzitzis was such an easy mitzvah while we're down here, right? It cost how much did a pair of tzitzis and a piece of string, a few pieces of a string cost him? But he said, the world that I'm going to, for all the money in the world, I can no longer do that mitzvah. I can no longer do it. The time has passed for working at it. So when we're here, when we're in this world, we've got the opportunity to work, the opportunity to make it our own. And I'm going to say the opportunity to overcome those challenges, because each one of them is an opportunity of growth. After 120, please God, when we get to the world to come, and we no longer have that opportunity, then the malach, then the angel says to us, right, what have you done to make it your own? That Torah that we learned together, those levels that you experienced, but you got them for free, for nothing. What have you done to make those your own? And every little action that we do, every minute of Torah that we learn, probably every word, in fact, of Torah that we learn, those are all of the things that we take with us. Those are the things that we're building into ourselves. And those are the ways that we're going to build a higher spiritual reality for ourselves. Thank you. Completes chapter 2.